From the moment she stepped into the world of business, she knew she was destined to make a mark. She was not just any entrepreneur, she was a black woman with a vision, determination, and the kind of courage that few could match. She had dreamed of owning her own hotel for years, imagining a place where guests would feel more than just comfortable, they would feel inspired, cared for, and valued. It was a bold dream, especially in an industry often dominated by others, but she had a spark in her that refused to settle for ordinary. Her journey had not been easy. From the very beginning, she faced skepticism, doubt, and countless obstacles. People questioned whether she had the experience, whether she could manage a large team, or even whether she could survive the competitive hospitality world. But she had grit. She had learned early on that success didn't come from waiting for opportunities, it came from creating them. She worked tirelessly, investing countless hours, pouring her savings into her vision, and learning every aspect of the business herself. She didn't just want to own a hotel, she wanted to run it in a way that reflected her values, her standards, and her dedication to excellence. Her hotel was more than just a building, it was a symbol of her journey. Every detail reflected her personality and attention to quality, from the elegant lobby to the meticulously cleaned rooms, from the welcoming staff to the small touches that made guests feel at home. It wasn't just about luxury, it was about creating an experience that left a lasting impression. Guests could feel the energy, the care, and the pride she had in her work. People admired her for her achievements, and her reputation began to grow. She wasn't just a hotel owner, she was becoming a leader in her community, a role model for others, and proof that determination could break barriers. Despite her success, running the hotel was not without challenges. There were employees who were loyal, hardworking, and genuinely wanted to see her succeed. But, like any workplace, there were others who resented authority, envied her accomplishments, or simply didn't respect the boundaries she set. These tensions simmered quietly at first, often unnoticed by guests or outsiders. They were small acts of resistance, disrespectful comments, half-hearted work, subtle defiance, but they hinted at problems that could grow if left unchecked. She knew leadership wasn't just about making money, it was about managing people, inspiring a team, and maintaining a standard that matched her vision. Even with these challenges, she remained confident. She had a natural charisma, a presence that demanded respect, and an ability to connect with people that was rare. Staff members often described her as fair but firm, someone who expected the best but also supported her team. She believed in leading by example, showing that hard work, integrity, and passion were non-negotiable. Her leadership style was a reflection of her personality, dynamic, bold, and unapologetically ambitious. Guests could see it, employees could feel it, and competitors often admired it from afar. What made her story even more compelling was the contrast between her rise and the skepticism she had faced. Every obstacle she overcame, every challenge she faced, only made her stronger. The hotel wasn't just a business venture, it was a personal triumph. It represented the countless hours of planning, the sacrifices she had made, and the relentless belief that she could succeed where others doubted. Every corner of the hotel whispered her story, her perseverance, her courage, and her refusal to be underestimated. At this stage, the hotel was thriving. Bookings were steady, guests were happy, and her vision of creating a space that combined comfort, elegance, and personal attention was coming to life. Yet, beneath the surface, tensions among some staff members were quietly building. There was an undercurrent of dissatisfaction, a challenge to her authority that she sensed but could not yet fully identify. She understood that leadership was never static, it required constant vigilance, insight, and the ability to respond decisively when situations arose. She loved her hotel, and she loved what she had built, but she also knew that success was fragile. A single moment of disrespect, a lapse in judgment, or unchecked defiance could threaten everything she had worked so hard to achieve. She remained alert, ready to face any challenge, confident in her ability to handle whatever came her way. And little did she know, the real test of her leadership and determination was just around the corner, an event that would shake her, surprise her, and ultimately reveal the depth of her resilience and power. Her story wasn't just about owning a hotel, it was about rising above doubt, conquering obstacles, and proving that vision, hard work, and self-belief could transform dreams into reality. The scene was set, the stage was ready, and soon, the hotel, and its CEO, would face a moment that would test everything she stood for. Even though her hotel was thriving and her reputation was growing, not everything was smooth behind the polished walls. Life in the hospitality industry was never as simple as it seemed. Guests often saw only the sparkling lobby, the pristine rooms, and the warm smiles of staff, but the CEO knew that maintaining that perfection required constant effort, and sometimes, difficult decisions. She had always understood that leadership wasn't just about being admired, it was about holding people accountable, even when it made others uncomfortable. Over time, small signs began to appear that not everyone in her team shared her vision. A front desk manager would ignore minor but important instructions. Housekeeping staff would cut corners when she wasn't looking. The sense of respect and discipline she had worked so hard to instill seemed to be slowly slipping away in subtle, almost invisible ways. At first, she tried to ignore it, thinking it might be stress or a temporary lapse in judgment. But as weeks passed, the signs became impossible to dismiss. There were whispered conversations in break rooms, disapproving glances when she passed by, and moments where employees outright questioned her decisions in front of guests. It wasn't just about small acts of defiance. There were moments that made her stomach tighten with unease. One employee openly challenged a scheduling decision, saying it was unfair despite it being carefully planned weeks in advance. Another subtly mocked the way she handled a VIP guest, suggesting to colleagues that she didn't understand the finer details of hospitality. These weren't just mistakes, they were deliberate acts of resistance, designed to undermine her authority and shake the confidence of everyone around her. The CEO felt a mix of anger, disappointment, and determination. She had spent years building her dream, and no one had the right to disrespect her, much less in her own establishment. The tension grew day by day, like a storm quietly gathering strength. The staff who were loyal and hardworking noticed it too. They could see the growing frustration in their CEO's eyes, the way she would pause during meetings, carefully choosing her words, and the moments when she silently observed the subtle defiance of others. It was a delicate balance. She wanted to act decisively, but she also didn't want to alienate those who supported her. Every interaction became a test of her patience, leadership, and ability to navigate a team that was slowly dividing into supporters and challengers. One afternoon, the breaking point came in a situation that no one expected. A key employee openly laughed at her suggestion during a staff meeting, a plan she had spent days perfecting, designed to improve guest experience and boost revenue. The laughter was quiet but deliberate, the kind that spreads like a ripple across the room, making others uncomfortable. In that moment, the CEO felt a surge of disbelief and fury. She had faced criticism before, but this was different. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a mistake. This was a challenge to her authority, a bold act meant to humiliate her in front of the very team she was trying to lead. For a brief moment, she froze, feeling the sting of betrayal. How could someone she had trusted, someone she had invested time and energy into, show such open disrespect? The room was silent now, everyone sensing the tension that hung thickly in the air. Guests passing by the lobby might never have noticed, but inside, the atmosphere was electric, charged with the quiet threat of a confrontation. She realized that this was no longer a minor problem. It had become a full-blown crisis. But even as her anger simmered, a different feeling began to emerge, clarity. She had faced obstacles before and had never backed down. She knew that how she responded in the next few minutes would define her leadership, her credibility, and the culture of her hotel. The defiance she had observed over weeks had now come to a head, and she understood that action was inevitable. This wasn't about revenge. It was about asserting the authority that her position demanded and protecting the integrity of the business she had worked so hard to build. In those tense moments, she quietly assessed the room, the people, and the dynamics that had brought them here. Every slight, every disrespectful glance, every whispered word of dissent suddenly formed a clear picture. She realized that tolerance for such behavior would only invite more of it. Her vision for the hotel, her dream of creating an environment of respect, excellence, and professionalism, depended on addressing the problem immediately. She couldn't allow doubt, arrogance, or defiance to thrive in her domain, not when she had worked so hard to create something exceptional. Little did the employees know, their disrespect would be met not with fear or panic but with decisive, swift action. The rising tension had set the stage for a moment that would shock everyone in the hotel, forever marking the day that authority, courage, and leadership were tested in the most dramatic way. The CEO's next move would not just resolve the immediate conflict, it would send a clear message to her team, to the guests, and to anyone who might underestimate her again. The air in the hotel seemed to change that afternoon. What had been a typical day, filled with the quiet hum of guests chatting and the soft clatter of dishes from the restaurant, suddenly became charged with tension. The CEO walked through the lobby, her posture confident, her eyes scanning the staff she had trained, guided, and trusted. She had faced challenges before, budget crises, unexpected guest complaints, even staff shortages, but nothing had prepared her for what was about to happen. It started with a comment from one of the senior employees. She had overheard it before, a subtle jab disguised as a joke, but this time it was loud enough to echo across the room. The employee laughed openly at her instructions, mocking her in front of colleagues and even some unsuspecting guests. The laughter, sharp and deliberate, sliced through the calm of the afternoon. It wasn't just disrespect, it was a statement, a challenge to her authority, made in the most humiliating way possible. For a moment, she froze, stunned by the audacity. She felt a strange mix of disbelief and anger. How could someone she had trusted, someone who had worked under her guidance, openly dismiss her in her own hotel? The very walls she had built to represent her hard work now seemed to witness a betrayal she hadn't anticipated. Staff who had once shown respect now shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, unsure where loyalty should lie. Guests noticed the tension too, sensing that something serious had just occurred, though they couldn't yet understand its magnitude. The employee continued, laughing louder this time, speaking with the kind of confidence that comes from knowing no one will challenge you. The CEO realized that this was more than just a disrespectful act, it was a deliberate attempt to undermine her. It was a power play, a challenge not just to her authority but to the foundation of her hard work. The audacity of it struck her deeply, but beneath the shock, a calm resolve began to form. She understood that her reaction in the next few moments would define her leadership and the culture of her hotel for years to come. This was not the time to panic, yell, or respond impulsively. That was the trap the employee wanted her to fall into. Instead, she allowed herself a brief pause, taking in every detail, the smirks of other staff, the tense silence of loyal employees, the curious glances of guests. In that stillness, clarity emerged. She knew exactly what needed to be done, and she also knew that speed, decisiveness, and authority were her allies. The employee's laughter gradually faltered as she noticed the CEO's unwavering gaze. The confidence that had seemed so effortless a moment ago now met a wall of resolve. It was a subtle but powerful shift in energy. Others in the room began to sense it too, the realization that this was no ordinary confrontation. This was a test of character, and the CEO was about to make it clear that she would not tolerate insubordination in her own establishment. Yet, the shock wasn't just professional, it was personal. She had invested years, sleepless nights, and almost every ounce of her energy into creating this hotel. It wasn't just a place of business, it was her dream, her legacy. And here, in a single, arrogant act, someone had attempted to strip away that respect. That realization ignited a fire inside her. The shock of being dismissed in her own hotel became the catalyst for a transformation of energy, an immediate shift from disbelief to unstoppable determination. She remained composed, every movement deliberate. The employees who had doubted her suddenly realized that the CEO was far from powerless. There was no yelling, no confrontation in the usual sense, but an unspoken tension filled the room. The loyal staff felt reassured, recognizing the quiet authority in her demeanor. Even the guests, still unaware of the full story, could feel that something significant was unfolding. In those minutes, the hotel became more than just a workplace, it became the stage for a pivotal moment in her life and career. The shock of her dismissal, of being openly challenged and laughed at, had transformed into clarity, focus, and the first step in reclaiming control. This was the moment where the story shifted, the moment where the CEO's authority and courage would be tested like never before. The stage was set for the next act, swift, decisive action that would not only address the immediate disrespect but also send a powerful message about leadership, boundaries, and the consequences of defying someone who had built an empire from sheer willpower and determination. In that charged, electric room, everyone knew something extraordinary was about to happen, though no one yet knew just how unforgettable it would be. After the laughter faded and the initial shock of the audacity sank in, she stepped back for a moment, alone in the quiet corridor just beyond the lobby. The hotel, normally buzzing with activity, seemed almost frozen. Guests continued about their business, unaware of the tension that had just erupted, while the staff inside lingered uneasily, realizing that something critical was unfolding. In that brief solitude, the CEO allowed herself to breathe deeply, to let the adrenaline settle, and to gather her thoughts. This pause wasn't weakness, it was strategy. She knew that reacting impulsively could escalate the situation, potentially undermining her authority even further. As she leaned against the wall, her mind raced through the events leading up to this moment. Every disrespectful glance, every whispered comment, every subtle act of defiance flashed before her eyes. Weeks of small tensions, which she had initially tried to dismiss, now revealed themselves as warning signs she hadn't ignored completely. The laughter of that one employee was not an isolated act, it was the culmination of a simmering undercurrent of insubordination that had quietly challenged her leadership. She realized that in order to regain control, she would need more than anger, she would need clarity, focus, and an unwavering presence of mind. She thought about the hotel itself, her dream brought to life. Every polished countertop, every carefully chosen piece of decor, every satisfied guest, every loyal employee, it was all a reflection of her vision. And yet, all of it had been threatened in a single, brazen act. That realization ignited a fire within her. The sting of betrayal turned into determination. She could feel the weight of responsibility settle firmly on her shoulders. This was her empire, and no one would undermine it without consequences. At the same time, she reflected on herself, not just as a CEO, but as a leader, a woman, and someone who had fought hard for respect in spaces where people often underestimated her. She recalled the countless times she had faced skepticism, board meetings where she was ignored, industry professionals who doubted her capabilities, and moments when she had been the only woman, the only black person, in the room. She realized that this moment, as humiliating as it initially felt, was just another test, a chance to demonstrate resilience and assert her authority. Her thoughts also turned to her team. While some had betrayed her, many were loyal, hardworking, and deeply invested in the success of the hotel. She couldn't afford to let the disrespect of a few ruin the morale and dedication of the majority. She had to act in a way that was not only firm but also fair, sending a message that loyalty, professionalism, and respect were non-negotiable. Every decision she made now would ripple across the hotel, shaping the culture for years to come. As she stood there, she began to visualize the next steps. She knew that action had to be swift, decisive, and authoritative. But she also knew that it had to be measured. Her goal wasn't to humiliate or punish without reason, it was to restore order, reassert her position, and protect the integrity of her business. The clarity she gained in those few moments was remarkable. What initially felt like chaos transformed into a blueprint for reclaiming control. She could feel a sense of calm confidence replacing the initial shock and anger. The pause also allowed her to reflect on the lessons hidden within this confrontation. She understood that leadership was rarely simple or easy. It required navigating complex human dynamics, managing egos, and maintaining composure under pressure. She realized that her ability to respond thoughtfully, rather than react impulsively, would define her not just as a CEO, but as a true leader. The challenges she faced today were not just obstacles, they were opportunities to demonstrate strength, intelligence, and unwavering resolve. In that quiet corridor, away from the eyes of staff and guests, she made a silent promise to herself. She would not allow disrespect to continue. She would address the betrayal decisively, but with the authority and dignity that had defined her career. The reflection, the pause, and the deep consideration had prepared her for what was about to come. Every heartbeat, every thought, every memory of her journey converged into a single point of focus, reclaiming her hotel, her authority, and her vision. By the time she returned to the lobby, her eyes were sharp, her posture unwavering, and her mind clear. The moment of reflection had transformed shock into strategy, doubt into determination, and betrayal into opportunity. She was ready. What would happen next would not only reshape her relationship with her staff but also cement her reputation as a CEO who commanded respect, faced challenges head-on, and never allowed anyone to undermine her authority. The stage was set for the decisive moment, the moment that would define leadership, courage, and the power of taking control. The CEO took a deep, steadying breath and stepped back into the lobby. Her mind was clear, her focus sharp, and every step she took exuded authority. The tense silence of the room seemed to acknowledge her presence, as if the hotel itself was waiting to see what would unfold next. The employees who had laughed, who had doubted, who had openly defied her, suddenly felt the weight of her gaze. For the first time, the audacity that had filled the room moments ago met an unshakable wall of determination. This was the turning point. She didn't rush or shout, she didn't react out of anger. Instead, she moved with the precision and confidence of someone who had faced countless challenges and emerged stronger each time. She began by addressing the room, her voice calm but firm, carrying the weight of authority that could not be ignored. Every word was deliberate, every pause purposeful. She reminded her staff of the standards she had set, the values she had built her hotel upon, and the vision that everyone had pledged to uphold when they joined her team. There was no room for ambiguity, respect and professionalism were non-negotiable. The atmosphere shifted almost immediately. The employees who had been audacious moments before now sensed that this was no ordinary confrontation. The confidence that had fueled their mockery was met with an unspoken power that demanded attention. The CEO could feel the tension in the room as her loyal staff exchanged glances, relieved to see her assert herself with such clarity and control. Even the guests, still quietly observing, could sense the authority radiating from her presence. She didn't just speak, she observed. She noticed who wavered under her gaze, who shifted uncomfortably, and who avoided eye contact. Each observation gave her insight into the mindset of her team, helping her decide how to act decisively. She understood that leadership in this moment required more than words, it required action that would leave no doubt about her authority. It was a delicate balance of firmness and fairness, an orchestration that could not be rushed. Then, with a calmness that belied the intensity of the situation, she began taking action. The decisions had been made in her mind during those moments of reflection. She would remove the employees whose behavior had undermined the integrity of the hotel. But she did it with precision, speaking to each person individually, explaining the reasons for her decision, and emphasizing the consequences of their disrespect. There was no drama, no unnecessary confrontation, just clarity, authority, and the unmistakable understanding that this was not negotiable. The room seemed to hold its breath as the first names were called. Some employees were visibly stunned, their earlier confidence replaced by disbelief and fear. They had underestimated her composure, her strategic thinking, and her ability to act decisively under pressure. Others remained silently relieved, recognizing that the culture they valued and the leader they respected was being defended and upheld. The CEO's actions sent a clear and undeniable message. In her hotel, respect and professionalism were sacred, and she would not allow anyone to compromise them. In that critical moment, she also demonstrated something more profound than authority, she demonstrated courage. It wasn't just about firing a few people, it was about standing up for her vision, protecting her team, and ensuring that her hard work was never diminished by arrogance or insubordination. Every choice she made in those minutes reinforced the values she had built her business upon. Every step, every word, every decisive action cemented her as a leader who would not be shaken by disrespect. By the time she finished, the room had transformed. The tension had shifted into a mixture of awe, respect, and relief. The employees who remained understood the unspoken rule: the CEO's authority was absolute, her vision non-negotiable, and her commitment to her hotel unyielding. The energy of the hotel itself seemed to realign, as if recognizing that order had been restored and the boundaries of respect firmly re-established. This turning point wasn't just about correcting behavior, it was a statement to everyone, staff, guests, and even competitors, that she was a CEO who commanded respect through intelligence, composure, and unwavering resolve. It was the moment where shock became strategy, doubt became clarity, and tension transformed into decisive leadership. From this point forward, the hotel operated under a renewed sense of purpose, and she emerged stronger, more confident, and more respected than ever before. The moment of reckoning had arrived. The CEO, calm but resolute, stood in the center of the lobby, every eye in the room on her. The air was thick with tension, a silence so heavy it felt almost tangible. Guests in the lounge continued their conversations in hushed tones, sensing that something extraordinary was unfolding without knowing the details. The employees who had mocked her just moments ago now felt a rising fear, a mix of disbelief, regret, and the dawning realization that they had underestimated her completely. She didn't raise her voice or act rashly, her authority was not in aggression, but in sheer confidence and composure. Her gaze swept across the room, locking eyes with those who had betrayed her trust. It was a look that carried years of experience, determination, and the unmistakable message that she was in control. She began speaking, her tone deliberate and firm. Each word landed like a hammer, precise and unyielding. Respect, accountability, and integrity were not negotiable in her hotel. Then she took action. One by one, she addressed the employees who had challenged her authority. She explained calmly but firmly why their behavior was unacceptable, detailing the repeated disrespect and insubordination that had led to this moment. There was no hesitation, no wavering, only the resolute clarity of a leader who had finally reached her breaking point. One by one, she let them know that their services were no longer needed. The room held its breath as the first employee gathered their things and left. Shock rippled through the staff who remained. Some tried to defend themselves, to offer excuses or justifications, but she remained unwavering. Her decisions were not personal, they were about protecting the integrity of her hotel, the dignity of her role as CEO, and the standard she had worked so hard to establish. There was no room for doubt, no opportunity for negotiation. This was leadership in its rawest, most decisive form. For those watching, it was a moment of revelation. Loyal employees, who had stood by her through challenges and setbacks, felt a renewed sense of respect and admiration. They understood that the CEO's actions, though severe, were necessary. She had shown them what true leadership looked like: strength without cruelty, decisiveness without malice, and authority without arrogance. The lesson was clear: no one could compromise the values of the hotel without facing consequences. Meanwhile, the employees who had been fired left the hotel, stunned and speechless. The audacity that had fueled their disrespect was replaced by disbelief. They had thought this was a place where rebellion could go unnoticed, where mocking authority would carry no repercussions. They were wrong. The CEO had transformed what could have been a moment of humiliation for her into a masterclass in asserting control, demonstrating that true leadership was about action as much as presence. Even as the last employee exited, the CEO remained composed. She didn't gloat, she didn't celebrate, the work was done, and the message had been sent. Her gaze softened slightly as she looked at the remaining team, a mixture of relief and respect evident in their eyes. This was more than a disciplinary action, it was a defining moment for the culture of the hotel. From this day forward, loyalty, professionalism, and respect would be the foundation on which the hotel operated. It was also a personal victory, a reaffirmation of her journey and the values she had carried since the beginning. She had built her hotel from scratch, faced countless challenges, and persevered against doubt and skepticism. Today, she had faced direct defiance in her own establishment, and had not only met it but had transformed it into a decisive, empowering moment. The staff who remained understood the lesson clearly. She was not just a CEO, she was a leader who demanded respect and commanded it effortlessly. As the room began to return to normal, the energy had shifted completely. The hotel, once tense with uncertainty, now pulsed with renewed purpose. Guests noticed the professionalism, the calm authority of the CEO, and the evident respect among the staff. The loyal team members felt a sense of pride in working under such a strong leader. And the CEO herself felt a quiet satisfaction, not from the act of firing, but from reclaiming control, standing firm in her values, and ensuring that her dream would continue to thrive without compromise. In that climactic moment, the CEO proved something that would resonate far beyond the walls of her hotel. Leadership is not about avoiding conflict, it is about facing it decisively. Authority is not about fear, but about clarity and action. And respect, once earned, must be defended with courage and unwavering conviction. This was her triumph, her statement, and the turning point that would define her legacy forever. The tension in the hotel lobby slowly began to ease, replaced by a quiet, focused energy. The shocking confrontation was over, but the work of restoring order had only just begun. The CEO knew that firing the disrespectful employees had been only the first step. True leadership required more than authority, it demanded rebuilding trust, reinforcing standards, and ensuring that the hotel continued to operate seamlessly despite the upheaval. She understood that the next phase was crucial, the hotel's culture and morale needed to be restored, and she was determined to lead the way. She began by addressing her loyal staff, gathering them in a small, calm space away from the guests. Her tone, now measured and warm, contrasted sharply with the firmness of her earlier actions. She acknowledged their dedication, their hard work, and their patience. She reminded them that while some had faltered, the hotel was built on teamwork, respect, and shared commitment. Her words were not just reassuring, they were empowering. The staff felt seen, heard, and valued, understanding that their loyalty had been recognized and rewarded. The CEO also took this opportunity to re-establish clear expectations. She outlined the standards of professionalism, communication, and teamwork that everyone needed to uphold. But she did so not as a dictator, but as a leader who expected the best because she believed in the potential of her team. She encouraged open dialogue, allowing staff to express their concerns or ideas while emphasizing that mutual respect was the foundation for any productive workplace. This approach strengthened the bond between her and her employees, creating an environment where respect was earned, reinforced, and nurtured. Meanwhile, the day-to-day operations of the hotel continued, and she led by example. She moved among the staff with a steady presence, checking in, offering guidance, and demonstrating the level of dedication she expected from everyone. Guests, though unaware of the earlier confrontation, could sense the renewed focus and professionalism. The hotel hummed with a quiet efficiency, as if the very walls were responding to the restored order. Employees, inspired by her composure and leadership, approached their duties with renewed diligence, knowing that they were part of something larger than themselves, a hotel that represented vision, excellence, and integrity. Part of restoring order also involved addressing the morale of the staff more broadly. The CEO recognized that fear alone could not maintain standards, it needed to be balanced with encouragement and support. She took the time to speak individually with team members, recognizing their efforts and contributions. This personal attention not only reassured her staff but also reinforced loyalty and trust. They saw that she was a leader who acted decisively when necessary but also nurtured and valued those who were committed to the shared mission. As the hours passed, a sense of equilibrium returned to the hotel. The shocking disruption that had threatened the harmony of the workplace transformed into a moment of clarity for everyone involved. Employees who remained understood the non-negotiable expectations, the importance of respect, and the consequences of undermining leadership. Guests continued to enjoy the service and experience they had come for, perhaps unaware of the drama that had just unfolded, yet benefiting from the renewed efficiency and professionalism that the CEO had restored. In this phase, the CEO reflected on her own role and growth. She realized that leadership was not just about managing a hotel, it was about guiding people, shaping culture, and making difficult decisions with confidence and integrity. By taking swift, decisive action and then following it with thoughtful support and guidance, she had not only restored order but had strengthened her team and the hotel's foundation. The staff now knew that their leader was both formidable and fair, a combination that inspired respect, loyalty, and a renewed commitment to excellence. By the end of the day, the hotel had regained its balance. The CEO stood in the lobby, watching her team move confidently and efficiently through their tasks. The energy was no longer tense or uncertain, it was purposeful, harmonious, and focused. She had turned a moment of crisis into an opportunity for growth, for clarity, and for reinforcing the principles that had always guided her. The lesson was clear to everyone: in a well-led organization, challenges could be met decisively, respect was earned and protected, and true leadership required both courage and compassion. This resolution marked not just the end of a conflict, but the beginning of a stronger, more unified team. The CEO had proven that authority could be asserted without cruelty, that standards could be maintained without fear, and that a workplace could thrive when respect and accountability were non-negotiable. The hotel was not just back to normal, it was better, stronger, and more resilient than ever before, ready to face any challenge that lay ahead. As the day drew to a close and the hotel returned to its rhythm, the CEO took a quiet moment to reflect on the events that had unfolded. What had begun as a moment of shock and betrayal had transformed into a powerful demonstration of leadership, courage, and resilience. She realized that the conflict, as difficult and tense as it had been, was not just a challenge to her authority, it was a lesson in the nature of leadership itself. True leadership, she understood, was not measured by comfort or ease, but by the ability to face adversity with clarity, decisiveness, and integrity. The lessons she had learned that day were many. First, she understood the importance of asserting authority with confidence. Leadership was not about popularity or avoiding confrontation, it was about setting standards and ensuring they were respected. By acting decisively, she had not only restored order but had also reinforced the values that had guided her from the very beginning: integrity, professionalism, and respect. These were not just words on paper, they were principles to be lived and defended every single day. Second, she realized the power of composure. In the heat of the moment, it would have been easy to react with anger or frustration. But by pausing, reflecting, and approaching the situation with a clear mind, she had turned potential chaos into strategic action. Her calmness had inspired confidence in her loyal staff, reminded the disrespectful employees of their missteps, and reinforced the trust of guests who, knowingly or unknowingly, observed the restored professionalism in action. Composure, she recognized, was one of the most underrated yet essential tools in leadership. Another lesson lay in the balance between firmness and compassion. While she had taken decisive action against those who undermined her, she had also supported, encouraged, and validated the employees who remained loyal. Leadership was not simply about punishing wrongdoing, it was about nurturing talent, protecting the culture, and guiding people toward growth. By addressing both sides of the spectrum, she had strengthened her team and created an environment where respect and dedication thrived. Perhaps the most profound lesson was one of self-belief. This incident had tested her not only as a CEO but as a person who had invested her heart and soul into building a dream. The disrespect she had faced could have shaken her confidence, but instead, it reaffirmed her resilience. She understood that challenges and opposition were inevitable in life and business, but they did not define her. How she responded, the clarity and courage with which she faced adversity, defined her. Looking around at her team, she saw more than just employees, she saw a community bound by shared purpose and mutual respect. The events of the day had created a stronger sense of unity. Loyalty had been rewarded, disrespect had been addressed, and the hotel now operated on a foundation clearer and more powerful than ever before. The experience had reinforced that true leadership required courage, decisiveness, and the ability to turn challenges into opportunities for growth. Ultimately, the CEO understood that her story was not just about firing employees or reclaiming control. It was about resilience, empowerment, and the unwavering belief in oneself and one's vision. It was about showing that authority could be maintained without fear, and that respect, once earned, must be actively protected. She knew that the lessons learned that day would guide her not only in her business but in life itself. As she stood in the lobby, watching her team work with renewed energy and focus, she felt a sense of accomplishment that went far beyond operational success. She had faced adversity head-on, reclaimed her authority, and transformed a moment of disrespect into a triumph of leadership. The hotel was thriving, her team was stronger, and her vision remained unshakable. That night, as she locked the doors and looked around the quiet, elegant lobby, she smiled to herself. Every challenge she faced, every test of character, had reinforced the truth she had always known: success is not about avoiding obstacles, but about meeting them with courage, clarity, and unwavering determination. The story of this day would remain a testament to the power of leadership, the importance of respect, and the unstoppable strength of a woman who refused to be underestimated. Her journey continued, stronger, wiser, and more empowered than ever, a true testament to resilience, vision, and the extraordinary power of standing firm in one's beliefs.